Hey everybody, Claire Van Seth. Welcome back. So for my revised lesson, I'm going to talk about my summative assessment feedback lesson. And this lesson is one that I use to transition between units. At the end of every unit, there's a summative assessment feedback, and then I hand out the students' vocabulary list for their next chapter and provide them time to not only give feedback on how the last unit went, but then they're able to start the vocabulary building for the next unit because for a classroom of ELs, at the high school level, building that academic vocabulary is really key. So before and after, so my first several years of teaching, whenever I gave a summative assessment that ended a unit, I would hand back scores, and if enough students understood the material, we would move on and start the next thing. And it seemed like a clunky way to go between units, and it didn't really provide for a whole lot of individualized learning or student feedback. So now, since doing the summative assessment feedback to end each unit, students are able to track their progress. And I'll show you an example in 1 second. The students provide feedback on how the lesson or assessment went, and it allows for more personalized learning. So I'll show you an example of what it looks like. I just picked a random example. So this is the packet that they get at the end of every unit, and I want to start the unit off positively. So I asked them, what concepts or ideas did you understand well? How did the content go? What went well? For the last test that I gave, a lot of students said, I understood the pyramids of Egypt the best. Great. Next, I asked them, what are your personal successes from the unit? How did you study for it? And a lot of the times they're honest. They'll say, well, I completed this one thing to study, but maybe I could have done another thing. That's up to them. Then I have them do the actual corrections. So they write the question number, they put the question topic, and then the correct answer. And a lot of the times they have to search for the correct answer. I don't just tell them the correct answer. So then they have an opportunity to do that. Then I have them chart their progress. Since we are one-to-one, students use Schoology to look up their scores. They do have to do some math. So for example, if a test is out of 20 points, I'll give them a score of 16 out of 20. They have to use a calculator, do the math, and figure out what the percentage is. Before I worked at a school that wasn't, what I did was I kept all of the summative assessments in a folder and made a portfolio for each student, so then they were able to receive the actual paper copies of the assessment at the end of every unit, and then each student would organize their assessments in that portfolio. Then I have them tell me about the graph. What does it look like? Tell me one sentence about the graph, and then is this helping you meet your academic goal? So that's really important to put the math into words. Next is, what is your academic goal, either for this class or for the next unit? For some students, it's, I want to get a B or higher on the next test. For other students, it's simply, well, I'd like to pass this class and get my credit. Great, that's a great goal as well. Some students say, I just want to do better on the next unit than I did on this unit. That's great too. So they're able to set their own personal goals. Then at the beginning of the year, we go over different study strategies, and I have a few of them listed on their study packet just to remind them of those study strategies that we talked about. And I asked them to create a plan or action step, 1 or 2 things that they're going to really focus on for the next unit. So for a lot of students, Most of my students come from oral traditions and are very auditory learners, and so they say, I'm going to study with a partner and we're going to talk about our notes. And that's been really successful for a lot of them. Then question 7, do you need a retake? I allow 1 retake per test. Again, certain teachers set different parameters around retakes, but I truly believe in offering a retake option for a variety of reasons. And then number 8, what additional support do you need from the teacher to help you meet your personal or academic goal? And the students are usually really honest with this part. Some students say, hey, I need you to not put this person in my group because they distract me. Some students say, get on me if you see me using my phone, which is really great feedback for me as well. So that's basically what the test corrections packet looks like, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about why I designed it the way I did. Book that was recommended for this class is The Highly Engaged Classroom. After reading this book, I really thought about the 4 questions and how I use them in my classroom. If you haven't read this book, the 4 questions are, how do I feel and am I interested? If they answer positively to that question, then the teacher has the student's attention. But the last 2 questions are, is it important and can I do this? And if the students answer positively to both of those, that creates an engaged classroom according to Marzano and Pickering. So things that both Marzano and Pickering state as helping students respond positively to the question, can I do this, is asking students to track their academic progress over time. And that's sort of why I put the graph and the description of the graph next in that packet. And I think it's a really good visual for a lot of students to see how did they do over time, specifically for my assessments. It's a reading style assessment with multiple choice questions for my high school EL classroom. That's the type of assessment that I'm doing, that I ask the students to track their progress, look at the graph, and tell me about the graph. Again, they set their personalized academic goals. They share them with me. I give them feedback on what their goals are or how they're doing. A lot of the times I like making comments like, this is a great goal, I think you're on the right track, or sometimes I make the comment, maybe you should think about this. Also, the other EL teacher and I went over how to create SMART goals, and so that is the expectation for goal setting. Students examined their effort and participation, again by asking them, how did you study and what was your score as a result? We're trying to really make that connection between effort and participation very explicit. In the Marzano book and Pickering, in this section they actually cite Dweck in the part about teaching self-efficacy through the personalized feedback. So by providing that personalized feedback, we're also building on Dweck's ideas of the growth mindset. Now, what are my intentions with this lesson plan? I really believe it fosters learning by using a growth mindset. We're keeping that conversation alive about self-efficacy, as mentioned in the Marzano and Pickering book. It provides an opportunity for a retake, which allows for the not yet. I know at the high school level, if a student scores, for example, at 20% on an assessment, it really becomes difficult to recover from that mathematically, and if that happens, a lot of the times I see students shutting down. So by providing an opportunity for recovering those points, it helps keep them engaged, it helps them answer, can I do this? Yes, you absolutely can. And then also on the test corrections packet, I don't put a score on it. I simply provide my comments. Of course, I put the score on our scoring platform, which again is Schoology. So they do basically get a score for completing it, but I don't put that on the packet. So I really appreciated that idea from Dweck. Academic achievement, again, Marzano and Pickering state that engagement leads to student achievement, and also allowing for retakes provides students with higher scores and are more likely to be able to receive at the high school the credit for the class and be able to graduate on time. Classroom, it also supports cultural competencies and builds on a classroom environment of respect and a rapport in support of cultural competencies. I first learned about cultural competencies from Gloria Ladson Billings out of UW in Madison. By the way, go Badgers. I also listened to some of her podcasts, which are absolutely worthwhile if you need something to mix it up while you're on the elliptical or bike. She's really great to listen to. She keeps me motivated as I'm working out as well. Anyway, at the end of her chapter on culturally relevant teaching, she states that effective teaching involves in-depth knowledge of both students and the subject matter. So by getting to know your students, you're creating a more engaged classroom and also building on the students' culture. So I really appreciate getting the students' feedback, figuring out what's going on with them each unit. And the kids are really honest. You know, sometimes they'll say, well, I wasn't able to get as much studying in because I had to watch my brother and sister after school all last week while my parent worked late. Okay, great. That's useful information for me. And it also helps me get to know my students better. And just by providing that feedback, it helps build that conversation of getting to know the students. In all of my comments, I treat the students with respect and dignity. And I feel like I'm honoring their life experiences through this process and providing another platform for our conversations. The other thing I want to say about cultural competency is since I do work in a high school EL classroom, I provide feedback in multiple languages. One of the student samples that I'm about to show you is actually all in Spanish. So by using those first language supports and honoring them and valuing them, I really feel that I'm making an effort to show that that's important in the classroom. So here, very quickly, are two student samples. This first one's in English. Both of the corrections that I picked for student samples are students who did not do well. I erased their names, and again, there's no score at the top. This was for an assessment about early civilizations in Mesopotamia and Egypt. That's what we read about for this assessment. And as you can see, the student says she understood some information, but was not as successful as she wanted to be in the reading. This is the graph that she created. She's quite honest and says, "This isn't my best. I didn't really study." She wants to get at least a B on her next test. She created some strategies to help her with her next test. I think those are great strategies. We set up a date and time as to when she would retake her assessment. She actually did much better on her retake that she did just yesterday, actually. And then she gave me some great feedback at the bottom here. Please answer my questions. Absolutely. We can absolutely study together. So that's one student example. Here's another student example. Again, this is the one in Spanish. So she says she understood the part about Egypt really well, but she didn't really study a whole lot. Then I provide the assessment in Spanish, so she's showing me the correct information in her native language, which is absolutely fine. You can't see it, but here's where she put her bar for her bar graph. She tried to tell me, well, 50% isn't bad, and my comment to her was, well, you need a 60% to pass, so maybe let's reevaluate your goal. She wants to get at least a B on her next assessment. which she actually got a B on her retake, which is great. So she says she didn't finish her notes, which is